Peja Stojaković was one of the greatest shooters in NBA history. From all areas of the floor, he was a sniper, incredibly accurate with a smooth, quick release on his jump shots. He was up there with Ray Allen when it came to shooting. During the 2000s, both of them were at the top of their games, but unlike Allen, nobody really talks about Stojaković anymore. Even though, in my opinion, Stojaković would be a perfect fit for this modern era of basketball. How's it going, fellas? My name's Andy, and today we're going to take a look at Peja Stojaković. How good was he actually, and what kind of playstyle did he have? Peja was drafted in the legendary 1996 NBA draft, selected right between Kobe Bryant and Steve Nash. But unlike the other stars from that class, Peja did not play in the NBA until 2 years later. In those 2 years, he was still playing basketball overseas in Greece. In 1997 and 1998, Peja was an all-star in the Greek League and also won MVP in 1998. Fun fact, in the 1998 season in Greece, Peja's team would play Panatoliko in the finals. Coincidentally, in that series, a 20-year-old Peja would play against his future coach, Byron Scott. At that time, Byron Scott's NBA career just ended and he spent his last year playing professional basketball in Greece. Unfortunately for Peja, he would lose the series. However, shortly after the loss, he announced that he was coming over to the NBA. In his first couple seasons, he was mainly coming off the bench as a backup small forward to Corliss Williamson, but even at a very young age, he showed flashes of star potential. Early on, he was primarily a jump shooter who stood at the three-point line and waiting for the ball to come to him. Occasionally, he would pull out some moves off the dribble and some cool passes that came out of nowhere. Eventually, after Corliss Williamson was traded in the summer of 2000, Stojaković became the full-time starter. The 2000 to 2001 season would be his first full season as a starter, and he instantly proved that he was a star. He averaged over 20 points a game and hit 40% of his threes. Over the next few years, he would continue to improve in every aspect of the game: his shooting, his defense, his passing, and his ability to finish at the rim, which was surprisingly a very strong part of his game. For his career, he shot 67% at the rim between 0 and 3 feet. Back then, that was a great percentage for a small forward, especially for a guy like Peja, who's not exactly a super athlete. Peja's success over the next few years resulted in 3 straight All-Star selections, 1 All-NBA third-team selection, and he won the three-point shootout twice, in 2002 and 2003. However, despite Peja's incredible play during the regular season, there were many times when he struggled in the playoffs. The most notable instance was in the 2002 Western Conference Finals. This was the series that, maybe the refs were favoring the Lakers a little bit, but what was swept under the rug was Peja's ridiculously bad performance. Yes, I do know Peja just recently came back from injury and he probably was not 100%, but still, he returned for the last 3 games of the series and played horribly. In the closing seconds of the fourth quarter in Game 7, Hedo Turkoglu passed the ball to a wide-open Stojaković, and he airballed the shots badly, by like 3 feet over the rim.
Here's Turkoglu giving it up. Stojaković for 3.
He finished the game with 8 points, shot 3 of 12 from the field, and missed all 6 of his three-pointers. Even if we don't look at the series, there were other times when Peja underperformed when the team needed him the most. 2 years after the series against the Lakers, the Kings would face the Minnesota Timberwolves in the second round of the 2004 playoffs. This year, Peja had the best season of his entire career, averaging a career-high 24 points a game, as he finished second in the entire league in scoring. But in the playoffs, he laid another egg. His scoring and shooting dipped across the board, and in the deciding Game 7 against the Wolves, it was deja vu, or Peja vu. Once again, he capped off an underwhelming Game 7 with 8 points on 3 of 12 shooting in 46 minutes of playing time. The Kings would lose the series, and that was the last chance they had. That was the end of that era, as they would blow up their team after the loss. Although Peja had his difficulties, I don't want to call him a playoff choker. He did have some great playoff series as well. There were a couple reasons for his playoff struggles. The main one was because defenses started to focus on him more. The best player on those Kings was Chris Webber, but just like Peja, he had some injuries. And whenever Webber was injured, Peja became the focus of the other team. It didn't help that Peja himself always seemed to have some nagging injuries whenever the playoffs rolled around. While he was a very versatile scorer, he still had trouble creating his own shot against great defenses. This is what separates great shooters like Peja from a guy like Steph Curry, for example. If the defense shuts down Peja's open looks, he wasn't good enough to consistently create off the dribble and attack the rim. So instead, he had to settle for a lot of difficult contested jumpers. Teams would always focus on preventing shooters from getting open looks, and with the way the Kings' offense worked, everybody was cutting, everybody was making passes and running around trying to get open. But this type of ball movement does not work well in the playoffs because the game slows down and it becomes a half-court game. This kinda exposed Stojaković since a large part of his offensive game was because of the Kings' ball movement. Anyway, as the years passed by, Stojaković would be traded a couple of times. He would spend 4 years in New Orleans playing alongside a young Chris Paul and David West. Unfortunately, this was when his injuries really started to pile up. He missed most of the 2006-07 season because of back problems, and eventually he had to get back surgery to fix the issue. You guys know what happens when people have back problems. Unlike a broken leg or a broken hand, back problems never go away. And it was clear that Stojaković could no longer maintain his all-star level play. But despite the injuries, he was still a solid role player in New Orleans. Occasionally, he would show flashes of his former self. One time, he even scored 20 straight points for his team.
Off the dribble, Okafor just left him free. Does he not know that Peja's now 5 for 5? An assist and a rebound. As Stojaković keeps scoring every Hornet point.
Might be, as you said, Gil, might be a little bit worse than we thought.
Peja Stojaković, late in the shot clock, he has all 20 Hornet points.
His time in New Orleans had its highs and lows, and the injuries were the lowest points of his career. Overall, those Hornets teams had other injuries that prevented them from reaching their full potential. On paper, those teams actually looked amazing. You had Chris Paul, who was very young, but he had the best seasons of his career when he was there. He was an MVP caliber player. You also had David West, who was an all-star. Tyson Chandler was the guy in the middle, and with Peja on the wings, they had a very good team from top to bottom. If it weren't for the injuries, they could have done a lot more than just a second-round exit. To cap off his NBA career, he played a crucial role in helping the Mavericks win their first ever championship. After the 2011 season, Peja felt that his back problems and the soreness in his knees were too much for him to continue playing. He retired right after winning the championship at the age of 33. During that championship run, he stated that, quote, "Being part of this run is something special. Having injury after injury, you don't always have the same strength to work and get back. But patience is the key word. I'm happy everything worked out." So, how good was Peja actually? Well, he's hard to evaluate because he's one of those guys whose impact goes way beyond his box score numbers. And even then, his numbers are great too. But it was way more than that. In his prime, the spacing he provided for those Kings teams allowed the entire system to work. That team played like a prototype version of the Warriors, using ball movement and a lot of screens to set up all their plays. With that being said, I'd say in his prime, Peja was probably somewhere between top 10 to top 15 in the league. In my opinion, he also made the greatest pass of all time. You can see it right here. Even though he averaged fewer than 2 assists per game, he was a much better passer than those numbers indicate. It's just that his role on his team was to shoot and score, not pass. Additionally, Peja had a drastic impact on the transformation of the NBA. As one of the most efficient scorers in his prime, he, and the Kings in general, had a major impact on the current day offenses. In fact, in today's game, at 6'9", 230 pounds, Peja could easily play power forward and he would be a matchup nightmare. Up until this day, he's still the greatest NBA player to ever come out of Yugoslavia. Nobody can challenge him for that title. And that's because, well, Yugoslavia does not exist anymore. Anyway, that's all folks, that sums up the story of Peja Stojaković, one of the greatest European players of all time. Let me know your thoughts on Peja. What would be the best comparison for him?